I've seen people change their hormones in a period of just 3 or 4 days simply by adding raw spirits every day because the toxins that were being removed were stopping the liver from inactivating estrogen and cortisol and blocking the body's ability to produce adequate progesterone.
Welcome to this episode. Today we're going to talk about mold and to listen to Dr. Peat answer a question about mold. So as we get into it, and as I set up our starting point, I'm going to want you to take notice of something, mainly that the first reaction is not necessarily to fix the environment or to pay tens of thousands of dollars for removing mold, although, that may be necessary at some point. However, the first thing to approach is your own body, to see if you can improve your ability to detoxify from these environmental toxins and assaults. And there are actually a lot of ways to do that and to help yourself fortify yourself rather than to just try to escape or get rid of all of the toxins that are around you, because they're all over, true, especially in our modern day. But first and foremost, let's see if we can improve our ability to detoxify. So we're going to go backwards in this interview, and we're going to pause and play a little bit. I'm going to intercede and then explain some things as we go. So let's dive in.
From toxic mold and what to do about it.
Having your liver working at top speed is the main thing. Reducing inflammation, and that means usually avoiding foods that would feed fungus and bacteria in your intestine, because when you're feeding bacteria excessively, those toxins, especially if you have bacteria growing in the small intestine where there shouldn't be, but most Americans do have bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine, that especially poisons the liver and reduces its ability to detoxify.
So let's pause there. Liver is the main organ that you need to detoxify from these assaults from any toxins in the environment that are coming in. So the point is that he's making first is that if you can help your detoxifying organ, then you're going to fortify yourself, make yourself more, increase your ability to get rid of those toxins. One of the things he mentioned that gets in the way of the liver is inflammation. And so he talked about a couple of foods that particularly cause an increase in inflammation. And we would say this is kind of a big part of why we are having problems in our modern day. And part is because of all of the mainstream and also, the influencer YouTube, the trends that come and go. But these foods that we've been told, are very health foods, superfoods, are actually very difficult for our human guts to be able to detoxify. So some of these things fit into the category of ruminant animal food, where grass, leafy greens, even these cruciferous vegetables, these are things that our human guts don't actually process well. They contain a lot of anti-nutrients for us, which means it blocks absorbing nutrition. So even if your spinach has a lot of micronutrients in them, that doesn't mean they get into our body. But if you give these things to a ruminant animal, a cow, anything that chews the cud, basically, they have special stomachs, those 4 or 5 chamber stomachs that can process these things. And then they turn it into things that we can actually digest when we eat the meat of that ruminant animal. But these kinds of foods are not really for us. The other category of beans, nuts, legumes, seeds, these are things that are very high in the polyunsaturated fats. You might hear the term PUFA. It stands for polyunsaturated fatty acids. And these are probably one of the biggest reasons for our health detriments, one of. And these are really hibernation type foods. So when a bear is about to go into hibernation, they will load up on these things. We've also seen with meat animals, that when you give them a lot of PUFA fats, that it fattens them up very quickly. And you can do that with even less food than just normal foods. So it's kind of works out okay for animals, because these meat animals are usually living just a matter of months or maybe a year or two, and then they're slaughtered and then we eat them. But then when we eat them, that's often a problem if they are, for example, like a chicken or a pig that are monogastric like us, one stomach. So you can think of these things are kind of food for ruminant animals. These things are especially hibernation type foods. And then we've got this category of store-bought baked goods, which usually include a lot of PUFA hidden in there, but also they're often, stripped of most of their natural minerals and vitamins, like all the B vitamins are stripped out. And then they add in lab-created B vitamins in that to give them shelf life. So all of these foods together are very irritating to the gut, causing inflammation. This causes the liver to work way harder than it should. And then when you add in something else like mold to the equation, your liver is already working overtime. It's already burdened. And now you're giving it a whole bunch more to work on. So this is part of why what we eat really matters, even all the way down to dealing with things like mold. Okay, let's keep going. Listen to Dr. Peat again.
Foods such as well-cooked mushrooms or raw carrots will help to sweep out some of the bacteria and suppress their growth, letting the liver be more effective.
So he mentioned now a couple of foods that are helpful, actually, and I filled out a couple more for you. So things like raw carrots, these cooked button mushrooms, cooked bamboo shoots. These three things would be daily foods that especially help to get rid of some of the things in the gut that cause inflammation. And the reason is they are mostly these insoluble fibers that pass through the gut, and they are kind of like, you could think of them as sticky. They grab onto a lot of the negative bacteria and they take it right with it. The bacteria can't feed on it because it's insoluble fiber. That's different than soluble fiber, which can feed bacteria and make things worse. But things like raw carrot and these mushrooms, bamboo shoots, and even activated charcoal, these things grab onto these bacteria and take them all the way out. So I noted here that with charcoal, you don't need it every day. For a lot of people, 2 times a week works well. But one of the easiest is raw carrots. It's kind of the one, if you search Ray Peat carrot salad, you'll find a bunch of ideas there. So ideally, you're doing this daily and you're doing it in the morning, because overnight, your bacteria in the gut, the negative bacteria, you could call that endotoxin if you've heard that term before, or LPS. So these negative bacteria really grow and proliferate overnight because you haven't been eating or fasting. And so getting them with the first thing in the morning is a great way to help clear that out for the day and then clear the path for what you're going to eat the rest of the day.
I've seen people change their hormones in a period of just 3 or 4 days simply by adding raw carrots every day, because the toxins that were being removed were stopping the liver from inactivating estrogen and cortisol and blocking the body's ability to produce adequate progesterone.
Let's pause there. Estrogen and cortisol, these are stress hormones. These are not hormones that you want high in the body, and they activate a whole cascade of negative effects. So normally, your liver is taking things like estrogen, cortisol, and then packaging it and getting it so that your body can excrete it. So you pee it out or poop it out. Either way, you excrete it, but you need the liver to package it. So if the liver is already overburdened by all these other things, then it's not going to be able to package up the excess estrogen. And now it becomes active again in your body, goes through the body again, and then is active. And then it's going to turn up that whole cascade of other stress hormones as well, including serotonin and cortisol. So an overburdened liver is going to increase these stress hormones, which gives it even more to do, even more for the liver to do. It's kind of like the stack of papers on the office desk. It just keeps piling up and multiplying. When those are high, then progesterone is not able to be produced as well in the body. As these increase, the progesterone decreases. This is not a good thing, especially for women, because progesterone is truly the female hormone. This is the protective hormone. Progesterone helps really eliminate estrogen in the body. And this is the hormone of, or a main hormone of fertility, but also of carrying the baby all the way through. Progesterone should increase all the way from month 1 to month 9, all the way up to birth, and is really the hormone that gets pummeled in postmenopausal women who are actually not low in estrogen in the body, especially their tissues. They're actually high in estrogen in the body. So that's a bit of a different conversation. But all of this, again, is going back to the liver and the burden of the liver. When your liver has room to work and it's strong, then it can get rid of things even like mold. Let's keep listening.
So I've seen the cortisol and estrogen levels drop sharply as the progesterone rose simply from having a daily carrot. And that means that the liver has returned to vigorous activity and is balancing the hormones.
And as far as the NASH goes, the non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, do you think she should deal with some supplements with that? Like, have you seen any research on things she could take for that issue or what she could do?
Usually the problem is caused by eating a very starch-based diet and sometimes too much phosphate, nuts and beans, and too much fish or meat are very high in phosphate. And that's disturbing to your whole metabolism, not getting enough calcium in your diet. But thyroid is the main detoxifying substance. Your liver simply doesn't run fast enough to manage to detoxify mold or industrial pollution or whatever if it doesn't have adequate thyroid activity.
Boom. Okay, so he just dropped a lot. Let's review that. So some of the things he mentioned that, again, are problematic oftentimes for the gut are a lot of these starches. And we've got another big one, like whole wheat, whole grains has been a big push by mainstream health and food. So these things, another big one are like the high fiber bars. These are all things that are actually really difficult for the gut. They're going to cause more inflammation in the gut, more endotoxin. That means more burden for the liver. So these foods are really needing to be dropped down big time, especially if you're having problems or you have a mold issue. Some usually well tolerated or better tolerated starches would be these things here, making sure even if you do get sourdough bread, if you're making it, that's fantastic. Milling your own grains, that's even better. But if you do buy it, you can find sourdough that's about 3 ingredients, and you want to make sure it doesn't have more than that. These are usually better tolerated. Now, he mentioned calcium. I don't know if he mentioned the ratio, but this calcium to phosphate ratio is a very big concept in the bioenergetic view. And a big portion of why we would say that the modern diet is very, very unhealthy is that we usually have a very high phosphate to calcium ratio, which is very bad. One of the things that it causes your body to pull calcium out of your bones, but then it ends up in things like your muscle tissue and your arteries, thus being part of that atherosclerotic plaque that's built up in your arteries, causing things like stroke and heart attack and whatnot. So high phosphate foods. Here again, we have nuts and beans on the list. Now, muscle meat is a unique one. It is fairly high in phosphate. And people that overeat a lot of muscle meat, so you got carnivore people especially, are going to be pretty high in phosphate unless they're eating a lot of calcium, which would be mainly from dairy is the best source of that. Muscle meats, though, they do cause another issue sometimes when just, again, eaten by themselves. I love meat. We eat lots of meat, but you need also collagen with it. And the reason is, that looks like a dot and an I. Terrible writing. Collagen. There we go. Beautiful. The reason is it's going to help balance the amino acids. Muscle meat by itself can be a little bit inflammatory because of the tryptophan, cysteine, and methionine, I think it is. Those 3 amino acids are pretty inflammatory. But when you consume it with collagen, or in other words, more collagenous cuts of meat, or mostly ground beef has a decent amount of collagen in it, then you're going to help reduce that inflammatory reaction. But also the phosphate needs to be balanced out too. So it doesn't mean get rid of muscle meat. It means eat it with collagen, ideally in the same meal, and eat or drink a lot of calcium. So Ray Peat would usually say about a half a gallon of milk, or the equivalent of that much dairy in a day, is usually going to be sufficient to get your calcium to phosphate ratio up there. If you can't do dairy, you should be able to. Eventually, there are ways to do that to get yourself to tolerate it again. But if you can't, then look up eggshell calcium supplements, like do it yourself. And that's going to be the best way to get calcium. I would really probably recommend avoiding almost any calcium supplement. I don't know of any decent one out there. Maybe there is, but most of them are made with lots of heavy metals and just very low quality, usually causing more problems than good when you supplement these calciums that are on the market today. So I would either do dairy or eggshells. Last thing, he mentioned thyroid, and especially thyroid as the detoxifying hormone, the greatest detoxifying hormone. And the reason he's mentioning it in that light is because the liver's capacity is really dependent on the energy given to it. Oh yeah, look at that writing. I'm using my trackpad there. The liver is really dependent on the thyroid and giving it enough energy. There's kind of an interdependence here too, because you need good liver function to help create T3, which is the active form of thyroid. But if your thyroid is functioning at a very low level, you're going to have very, oh my goodness, I got to rewrite this. Sorry. Liver. There we go. Your liver is going to be already at a decreased capacity because of low thyroid. Then you're decreasing further your capacity of your liver by eating all of these so-called health foods, up here and up here. And of course, the polyunsaturated fats that are all over. Seed oils are just an example of that, but they're high in seed nuts, fatty fish, conventionally raised pork, the fat of the pork. So you've got a couple of assaults already going on your liver, not to mention all the other, modern assaults we have through lack of getting sunlight, through terrible lighting and screen time and all those things, the other foods we have, all the stuff we put on our skin. So you've already got a ton of strikes going against your liver. The thyroid can be one of those central components that if you can flip that switch, you're going to give your liver a huge push forward.